Of all the legendary writers that made up our childhoods, very few were as quirky and unforgettable as the works of Theodore Geisel, better known by his pen name, Dr. Seuss. Boasting a drawing style unlike any other, filling his books with environments and creatures that are the embodiment of imagination, writing rhymes and nonsense words that come as naturally as life itself, and sneaking in clever metaphors and allegories that gave many of his stories a level of maturity that even adults can admire, Seuss truly had a style that was impossible to match. I think all of us have been exposed to at least a few of his many works growing up, be it The Cat in the Hat, Green Eggs and Ham, Oh, the Places You'll Go, and piles of others. But even those who haven't do know about his legacy in one form or another, and with such widespread recognition, many different takes have naturally arisen in the decades since his untimely passing. From stage musicals to big budget films and even full TV series. Varied as they were in quality, it's hard to deny they consistently did what they could to keep the wacky world alive. But what doesn't always get the same attention are the works that try to expand the Seuss brand within the author's own life, and by far the biggest avenue of this were a series of TV adaptations. We all know about How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and have probably seen a couple others at some point, but you don't really see them get talked about much, so I figure, why not give them a look for myself? So in this series, I will be looking at all 12 TV tunes of Seuss that either took an existing story of his and simply translated it into a new medium, or a new story that Ted wrote himself for the silver screen. Which means that no, I'm not going to be covering the movies, at least not in this series, as those are different beasts altogether.
How bad can I possibly be?
Or something like Zero Brick Boing Boing, which was his idea, but was given life by a completely different group of people. I'm also not going to be covering the private snafu short he did with Warner Brothers alumni, because I'm frankly pushing myself enough to start making video reviews as it stands. I'd rather not throw World War II propaganda in there. So without further ado, let's get this journey started.
I meant what I said, and I said what I meant. An elephant faithful, 100%.
Yeah, believe it or not, the first Dr. Seuss animation was actually all the way back in 1942, specifically as a Merry Melodies cartoon directed by the one and only Bob Clampett. And yes, I know this isn't a TV special, but it's still an animated adaptation of his story, so just work with me here.
I still can't get the word to that song.
The story of Horton Hatches the Egg, a humble but effective tale about the hardships and dedication of real parenthood, was only Dr. Seuss's 5th book ever published, and is in my opinion a good first step into bringing this kind of world into animation.
Pardon me.
As it was made in the early 40s, it is full of witty gags of both the physical and dialogue variety, as well as a handful of bits that, shall we say, only could have come out of that time period.
Well, now I've seen everything.
But even with all that wackiness, it still knows to put focus on the story, and it's easily the most word for word with the source material of all these adaptations. The narration is definitely a little on the overdramatic side, but it does a good job at keeping the tension going.
He heard the men's footsteps. He turned with a start. A rifle was aiming right straight at his heart.
It also was one of few animated productions at the time to not use a traditional storyboard, instead taking notes and jotting down additional ideas within the original book. From what I hear, Seuss himself wasn't all that impressed with the bits that were tacked on, and while some of them admittedly do feel a tad out of place given the relatively earnest story,
No, you can. Oh, no. Oh, yes, they can.
it honestly wouldn't feel like a Warner Brothers cartoon without those moments. Plus, it is about a freaking elephant on top of a bird's nest. You probably came in expecting this kind of nonsense.
Horton the elephant's up in a tree.
I will say that some of the designs and color choices are a little weird, as well as Horton's voice, who just sounds stuffed up the entire time, but I chalk that up to Seuss's style not being the most defined at that time.
And I'm so immense.
The "I meant what I said" line is also probably said a few too many times. It makes sense in terms of poetry, and it is a strong message that you probably should hammer a bit. But when translated in this sort of way, I think it just gets a little repetitive after a while. But yeah, there's really not much else to say about this. It's far from the best the studio had to offer at the time, but it's still a pretty interesting experience at just how early on talented animators took a crack at the Doctor's work.
It's something brand new.
I can best describe it as an experiment of bringing this kind of story to life. And that's kind of what I appreciate about it. But of course, the best was 100% yet to come. I should also briefly mention that there were 2 shorts made by stop-motion animator George Powell shortly after this for And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street and the 500 House of Bartholomew Cubbins, but I didn't know those existed until like a day before recording this, and I can't find copies of them anywhere, so fuck it.